Hi guys, and welcome to this Back to Basics series video on PVA glue. Now most of you guys will probably know this as hobby glue, craft glue, wood glue or carpenter's glue. I believe in the States it's called Elmer's glue. Its actual proper name is polyvinyl acetate, and it was discovered in Germany back in 1912 by a guy called Fritz Klate. So he's the guy we've got to thank for this stuff. Now it's the most widely used glue in terrain and scenery building, and there's a couple of reasons for that. First off, it's virtually non-toxic. You don't need to wear gloves, goggles, or it doesn't give off any harmful fumes. And basically, as long as you don't get it in your eyes or eat it, you're going to be perfectly fine. If you do, contact your local medical services, whoever you have to dial an emergency and check it out. Now, this stuff is water soluble, and a lot of people think that once it's dry, it's actually waterproof, and it isn't. Yeah, but you can mix it with water, which gives it a lot of different uses when building terrain, and I'm going to go through a few of those uses shortly. A couple of interesting points. It dries best at room temperature, especially with somewhere that's got a reasonable flow of air and isn't sort of sitting room. Other information is when it gets frozen, and i.e. when it gets in temperatures below 0°C, the polymers inside break down, and what this means is it comes apart. So if you leave your terrain in your car boot on a cold night, don't be surprised if you come back and bits are falling off it or gravel's falling off it. So be aware of that. On the plus side of that, if you get it on any of your clothes and your wife's giving you hell, stick it in the freezer, 10-15 minutes, throw it in some cold water to give it a wash, and do that a couple of times and it'll come out because it'll just break down. Now, before we actually get into the hobby side of this, I thought I'd do a bit on the economics of PVA. And this amount, which is about a quarter of a litre, 250 millilitres, is going to cost you round about £5 from a gaming store. And there's one particular gaming store where I know that half of this will cost you £5. I won't mention any specifics, but I'm sure you can work it out. So this much, quarter of a litre, hedging your bets, £5 from a gaming store. Now PVA's got a lot of different uses. It's used a lot in crafting and in art. So you can buy it from a craft and art shop. And if you buy it from a craft and art shop, you will get a litre. Now a litre from a craft and art shop will cost you £5. So quarter of a litre from a gaming shop, £5. Litre from the craft store, £5. Now, it's also used in building, which means you can get it from your local builders merchants. And if you go to your builders merchants, you can get one like this, which is 5 litres. And that will cost you a mighty £5. So, £5 from the gaming store, £5 from the craft shop, £5 from the builders merchants. Or thereabouts, local prices will vary a bit, but that's how much I paid roughly for all of these. Quarter of a litre, 5 litres. Now obviously, it doesn't take a genius to work out the economics of this, but before you all go running out and buying 5 litres of PVA, let's actually think of it. This stuff was designed, and this sort of quantity is easily enough to base your army. So if all you're looking to do is base an army, stick with this. But don't buy it from your gaming shop. Go to Poundland, they sell it for £1. If you're looking to do some scenery, and I'm not talking loads, but put a few pieces together, who knows? This is the one. £5 from your arts craft shop. Just go grab one of these. If you're looking to build tables, this is your beast. Plain and simple. Don't spend money you don't have to. And what I mean by that is quite simple. If all you want to do is base an army, don't buy that. Because all you're going to be left with is a tub lying around and you haven't really saved. You've spent the same money, and now you've got something that takes up space. So there you have it. That's the economics. I'll leave it to you to decide where you get it from based on how much you want to pay and how much you need. But just be aware that just because one place sells it, you might be able to get it somewhere else cheaper. Now, what I'd like to do now is actually look at PVA as a glue. So, let's have a look at that, Now, PVA as a glue is excellent at gluing porous materials, so that's things like card, foam, balsa wood, wood, paper, anything that the glue can soak into. What it isn't good at gluing is plastics, certain metals and rubber. Yeah, basically plastics, just don't go anywhere near it. Use plastic glue or super glue. Yeah, don't use PVA, and I'll show you why in a little while. But what I'd like to do just right now is just show you PVA if you've never used it. So, it's a white, thick glue. It's not too runny. And, you know, you've got quite a lot of control with it. Now, as it's water soluble, you can use a brush and then brush it on from a blob. Or you can use something like this, which is, you know, a craft applicator to spread it around. You know, it's quite a forgiving glue. It takes about 4 hours before it initially sets and 24 hours for it to set completely. So if I get another piece, put it on, yeah, and because it takes so long to set, you can literally manipulate that over time. And there's a knack to gluing with it. It requires pressure to adhere properly. Now for building terrain, it's not really a problem. If you were using it in DIY, yeah, then I would definitely consider clamping things and securing them. With terrain, they're not going to really be taking much weight, so it's not a major issue. But I will go through a couple of little tips real soon. So, that's PVA. Let's see it actually in application, eh? Now what I've got here, I built this earlier, yeah, is a simple foam board construction, and we'll talk about foam board at a later point in a different video. Yeah, so I won't go into it here, but basically it's tough board, yeah, and it's used for the majority of buildings when you're building scenery. Yeah, but it's sturdy, it's easy to work with, it's solid, and the actual thickness of it gives off the sort of width you'd expect from a wall in 28mm gaming. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to glue a couple of pieces on here so you can see the glue in action and give you a couple of tips in how to use the glue when building scenery. So first as always, yeah, dry fit. Yeah, check it out, make sure your piece fits. Yeah, because there's nothing worse than gluing it and realise you've glued the wrong edge. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to run a thin line across there. Yeah. See it? And then that'll go placed there. Now before I do, what I'm going to do is I'm going to run another line along here to join up with there, but I'm going to make this a bit excessive, yeah, and you'll see why in a moment. Yeah, way too much glue for the job, way too much glue on that. See that? Right, so let's put this in, stick it down, yeah, and you see the blob. See those blobs running there? Running there? Yeah, right. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do exactly the same with the other side. So, dry fit it, quick run across the bottom, yeah, big blob along this line. And the reason I'm doing these blobs is I actually want to show you how to clean it up and what happens if you don't clean it up. So, there you have it, big blob, little line, come to the point, line it up, and I've buggered it. Right guys, you'll notice, yeah, that doesn't line up with that, which means I've glued the wrong end, which means I wasn't concentrating when I was dry fitting. My bad. Luckily, I'm just showing you gluing and not building. So, as you can see, it's run down, it's quite sticky, it's caused a couple of blobs at the bottom. Now what will happen is if I leave this to dry, these sides here will actually form and you'll be able to physically see the blobs and the ridges. Yeah, and so what you've got to do is you've got to clean them up, and what I use is a damp cloth. So I'm going to clean up my screwed up side. Yeah, I'm just going to pull it down. Yeah, it's a bit awkward because I'm sort of working over the top of it. Yeah, but just using the cloth. Excuse me for a second. There you go. There you go. And that's cleaned it up nicely. You'll see how the water's just literally cleaned it off, and compared to the other side, it's much smoother. Yeah? Excellent. Now, a couple of other little things that I'd like to show you. First off, yeah, is if you're trying to glue something, yeah, because it takes so long to dry, you may need to pin it, especially if it's foam board, because it tends to get warped and you may have to pin it in a certain position. And for that, I use these. Yeah, and these are upholstery pins. Yeah, or tailor's pins, should I say. Yeah, little red blob on the end so you can easily see where they are in the model. Yeah, and all you do is you push them through. And that will hold it nice and tight. And I've got another one here. So, literally put it there, push it through. Yeah, and that's secured that nice and tight. It's going nowhere, and I know that's holding. Now, the other thing I mentioned was it needs pressure to adhere properly. So the other thing you can do, and if you're building a big building, I highly recommend this, is while it's gluing, just rip off odds of masking tape. Yeah, stick it on, pull it tight, stick it down. Yeah, and then finally, yeah, happy with it? Now the masking tape can spring off, you may find yourself going back to secure it, but that basically holds it while the glue's drying. Yeah. Now, what we'll do is we'll quickly fast forward and I'll be able to show you what it's like when it's dry. Right, it's been about 24 hours now since we glued this, and what I'd like you to take a look at is the side that we cleaned with the damp cloth is all nice and smooth, there's no problems with it whatsoever. But the side that we didn't clean and we left the blob at the bottom has formed this large blob. And that's going to be quite difficult to get off, and you don't want to be doing that, which is the reason you should clean things up. Now, if you look at the blob, what's quite interesting is that the outside of the blob is quite clear, yet the inside is white. And the reason for this is that the glue on the inside is trapped and can't get to the air, and so that's still wet, and that will take forever to dry, if it ever does. So what you need to take away from this is small amounts of glue really well. Also, make sure that if you do leave blobs, just run a wet cloth over it afterwards to clean it up. The results are well worth the time, should I say. Now, what we're going to do quickly is pull out these pins, and as you can see, there's no problem with getting them out whatsoever, and that's giving us a nice strong bond. On the other side, with the masking tape, I'm going to pull this out, and I'm going to pull it out towards the join. And what I mean by that is quite simple. If you can see it's joined there, if I pull it from this side, and what will happen is as I reach here, I'll pull the joint away. And what I don't want to do that. I want to pull across the joint. And the same with putting it on. When you're actually putting this stuff on, you want to put your tape here first, pull it, and then pull it towards the surface you're gluing it to. Yeah, and the reason for this is if you do it this way and you pull it this way, you might not have it secure enough. Yeah, so always tape there, pull towards the joint. Yeah. So let's peel this off quickly. I wasn't expecting any problems anyway. And there you have it. That's the finished piece. And as you can see, nice and clean, nice and sturdy. And should we see how far we can push this? Okay. There you go. And on this side, there. That's it ripped. Now as you can see, on both sides, the material has failed before the glue has. Yeah, you've got the remnants of the paper, and it's literally ripped straight off. Yeah, so it's not the glue that's failed in that joint, it's the material. Yeah, so this stuff will easily hold up to wargaming, easily. Okay, so that's gluing for you. Next thing I want to talk about is sealing, and that's, well, let's get on with it, shall we? When it comes to sealing, PVA is really good, guys, and the reason for this is quite simple. It's water based and therefore water soluble, and what that means is you can dilute it with water. Now when it comes to diluting, yeah, it's dead easy to do, but you obviously got to get a mixing pot or something to mix it in with. And what I find is when I'm making terrain, when I first started out, what I used to do was make it as I needed it, and then I'd end up pouring half of it, down the drain or wherever, get rid of it, not using it, because it dries out over a long afternoon. Yeah, and that's quite wasteful. So I've started saving mine in these little tubs. And to actually dilute it, it's dead simple. All you really need is between 1/3 and half PVA, depending on what you're doing. Yeah, for sealing terrain, I normally go for about 1/3. So I'm going to use this stuff here, because it's a bigger bottle and it shouldn't take as long to fill. Yeah, and almost done. There you are. Now it's not 1/3 of the entire tub. I don't want to fill the entire tub. Okay. And there we go. Did I get it over the tub? Probably. Right. Next thing I want to do, so just to show you, yeah, there's about that much there. I'm going to fill it with water. Yeah. And if you notice, and I'll bring this closer to the camera so you can see, yeah, the water sits on top of the PVA. Yeah, it doesn't naturally just disperse, it needs mixing. Yeah, and that's because the PVA is a glue and it's dense. Yeah, so quite simply, all you need to do is to get a stick, yeah, and just start stirring it. Yeah, and what this will do is it'll break up the PVA, and that slowly it'll get cloudier and cloudier. Yeah, you can still see how the PVA is breaking up. And what you want to do is get it to roughly a milk-like consistency. Yeah, and that's perfect for Wargames terrain. Yeah, majority of the time you're using this to either seal polystyrene, or you're using it to seal gravel on bases or around the edge of things. Yeah, so this sort of consistency is absolutely perfect. If you plan on keeping this stuff a long time, I'd highly recommend putting something like an agitator in. Yeah, such as like a marble, something that won't react with the PVA and that you can use to give it a shake. So speaking of giving it a shake, I'll give that a wipe quickly. Yeah, put the lid on. And that's it, ready to go. Yeah. Now what I've got here is a large base that I gravelled earlier. Basically spread PVA on it and then just poured gravel over it. Yeah. Now you'll notice that I've put it on top of a painting base, and basically it's on stilts. It's blue tacked on. And the reason that I've done this is because this is quite liquidy and quite like water now. Yeah, it will flow over the edges and it will drip. Yeah, and if you don't put whatever you're sealing on an actual legs and stand it off the surface, it will seal to the surface and glue to the surface you're working on, whether that's your worktop, whether that's your wife's favourite oak chopping board. Yeah, and trust me, it really does seal well to those. Yeah, so raise it up, put it on something temporary, yeah, that you can throw away. Now I've got this bit of MDF that I work on. If you haven't got a piece of MDF you can work on, bit of cardboard, any drips will just soak in, and then you can throw away the cardboard when you're done with it, and the wife's happy. So quite simply, yeah, okay, so you can see that nice and easy. Now when you're applying this stuff, it's quite frothy because I've just shaken it up, but when you're applying this stuff, yeah, don't be too vigorous. Now because PVA is a water-based glue, as you put it on, it will actually loosen the glue that's holding the gravel on, and I'll show you that in a second. Yeah, but basically you want to be gentle. At the moment, with my finger, I can be quite rough with this. Yeah, And just be aware of how rough I'm being, because it is glued, it is dried, it's been over 24 hours. Yeah. As I put the sealant on, and can you see that running off the edge? Yeah, that will drip, and that's why we've got the legs, so to speak. So just plaster this on, and don't worry about putting too much on. Yeah, just get it on there. Yeah, nice and gentle. I'm basically just dropping it down. Yeah, and as you can see, then what you can do is literally just turn it like that, and you will see it all slowly running and dripping off, because you don't need it all on there. And that is the basics of sealing. Right, can you see that? Yeah. Now, I'm not sure if it'll do it yet, but let's see. No, it's not going to lift just yet. But over time, in about 5 minutes, and what I'll do is I'll forward this 5 minutes. So, here we go. Now, it's been about 10 minutes and it's still wet, but what I wanted to quickly show you is that whereas before it was quite stuck, now the grit's actually loosening and it's coming off. Yeah, and I know it's difficult to see on the webcam, but the longer this goes on, the more it loosens, and especially depending on how long it's had to dry when it first fixed. So if once you've got your sealer on, it's best just to leave it alone. Leave it to dry completely. Yeah. If you do have an accidental knockage and you move the grit and all of a sudden you've got a bare space of base again, all you need to do is get a little bit of pinch grit while it's still wet and just dribble it on. Yeah, and that will soak up any sealant around it and seal back over. So what I'm going to do now is fast forward till this sets completely, and then I'll be able to show you the finished piece. Right guys, here's the finished piece. It's completely sealed and dried, and as you can see, it's quite tough. I mean, it's going to take a fair effort to break anything off it, and this is why it makes it really good to seal your Wargames terrain with PVA, because Wargames terrain does take a bit of hammer over the years. Yeah, and so sealing it with PVA, especially things like grit and loose little bits, really makes it hold up to it. Now, one other thing, and I'll show you this now, when I said that PVA is a brilliant glue for sticking porous materials together and it's useless for plastic, I'd just like to show you something about when it's with plastic. Now obviously the base it's glued onto is plastic and it has stuck pretty well, but if I get my finger in here and I pick it, I'm actually able to lift it off. Can you see that? Yeah, and what I'll do is let's see how far we can take this. Oh, yeah. So, there's your grit disc. Yeah, and that's the PVA. Yeah, and the base it was stuck onto, completely clean. So as you can see, PVA really doesn't stick that well to bases. It will do well for wargaming because at the end of the day I had to get my nail under and actually physically pick that off. Yeah, and if anyone does that to your models, hit them. Plain and simple. Yeah, so for glued to plastic, not brilliant. Don't use it as a glue for gluing for plastic and wargames terrain, especially plastic to plastic. For basing, it does okay, it will be secure, so don't panic, don't stop using it for your bases. I mean, one of the plus sides of PVA is, as you can see, if you don't like how you've done your base, you can easily take it off and redo it. So, that's sealing with PVA, which is a major factor in wargames. Yeah? Let's close this up. Right guys, those are the two main applications of PVA in terrain and scenery building, both gluing and sealing. It's got a few other applications. It can be mixed with inks and paints to make some interesting water sludge effects. It can also be used for making papier-mâché, and what I'll do is I'll cover those in a future Back to Basics video. One final thing before I shut this video off is I'd like to give a big shout out to Fritz who discovered this stuff, because to be perfectly honest, I couldn't be building terrain without it. Hope you found the video interesting, and if you did, please subscribe to my channel on YouTube. Yeah, if you're watching this on YouTube, there should be a notation coming up somewhere around here, around about now. If you're watching it somewhere else or you're not interested in YouTube, you can check out my website/blog. The address is www.theterraintutor.co.uk. So that's www.theterraintutor.co.uk. I'm also on Facebook, and I've got a Facebook page. You can find it at facebook.com/theterraintutor. In the meantime, keep learning, keep practicing, have fun, guys. I'll see you soon.